Well, good morning. We've got our second presentation this morning. Tripp Corbin is our presenter. Tripp is in the GIS and Aerial Business Development Manager for Survey and Mapping LLC, also known as SAM. With over 28 years of surveying, mapping, and GIS experience, Mr. Corbin is recognized as an industry expert with a variety of geospatial solutions, including Esri, Autodesk, Trimble products. During his career, he has assisted various organizations use and implementation using GIS throughout US and Canada. This has included local governments, nonprofits, educational institutions, utilities, and private companies. He holds multiple GIS and IT certifications, including Microsoft Certified Professional, GIS Certified Professional, CompTIA Certified Technical Trainer, Esri Certified ArcGIS Desktop Professional, and Esri Enterprise Desktop Design Associate. In addition, Tripp has written 3 books on Esri's latest desktop GIS application, ArcGIS Pro, Learning ArcGIS Pro, Learning ArcGIS Pro 2, and ArcGIS Pro 2 Cookbook. He's also very active in the GIS community as a past president of ERISA and a member of XYHT Geospatial Magazine editorial board. Here you go, Tripp.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for coming out and listening to me speak this early in the morning, especially if you were out having fun with the bar hopping and whatnot last night. I'm very excited to be here. So what I'm going to be talking to you about this morning is utilizing GIS for LCR, lead copper rule, right? How do we go through and clean these nasty things out of our water system so we don't end up like Flint, Michigan, right? That's where we're going with this. So if you'll go ahead and advance the slide. There we go. Before I get going to that, I do want to tell you a little bit about SAM. I'm not sure that a lot of y'all have heard of us. As you said, it's Surveying and Mapping LLC. We're one of the largest geospatial providers here in the US and now into Canada. We just acquired a Canadian office a few weeks ago. So very excited about that. Go ahead and advance the slide. So what we do is a lot, right? So traditional land surveying, whether it's boundary, topo, construction stakeout, all of those traditional land surveying functions there. We also do aerial mapping. So whether that's traditional orthos or obliques, tied into that, we also do a lot of LiDAR. So it's airborne LiDAR, both fixed wing and rotary wing, so helicopters. As well as drones and mobile LiDAR and static LiDAR. And we just recently started getting some backpack LiDAR units. So allows us to get into buildings and substations and things like that to build that data out, which can then be put into BIM as well as traditional GIS use there. So anyway, that's enough about SAM. So we'll go ahead and move on to the meat and potatoes here. So next slide. So what we're talking about is the federal requirements to go out and make our water system safer, because there's a lot of legacy lead pipes, copper pipes, lead solder and things out there. And we know that this is not good for people. Lead and people don't mix, not well anyway, right? So what we need to do is go out and find out where we have issues, right? Where do these things exist? So as of right now, EPA has a requirement that all water systems are supposed to go out and do a complete and thorough inventory of their systems. Now, this has to be completed by October 16th of 2024. Basically, you have 2 years. How many of y'all have even started one of these inventories? 1, 2, 3. Okay, good. Good. So the gotcha to this is it's not just your supply side, it's also on the customer side. So the other side of that meter. How many of y'all have information about what's on the other side of the meter? Well, we got one. Okay. So this is something you got to keep in mind. If you have not been brought into the picture yet as a GIS person, you might want to go start talking to somebody. You don't want to be sitting there in July of 2024. The water superintendent walks into your office going, "Oh my God, I've got a water inventory I've got to get done. It's got to be done by October. We got to submit it to the state. Help." That's not a fun place to be. I've been there in other situations, right? So what we have to do is part of this inventory is identify where those lead services are. where those copper service lines are. And by service, I'm talking about the distribution and the customer side lines out there. And then also any galvanized lines that are out there that are or have been downstream of lead. So if you've gone in and replaced lead, but you know you have galvanized that are downstream, you need to be able to note that as well. So we're talking about a pretty thorough inventory of things here. So next slide, please. Now, I guess, nice thing is this isn't one of those completely unfunded mandates. My dad used to be the city engineer for a bunch of cities down in Georgia, and he always would come in at the end of the day complaining about these unfunded mandates that would come down from the feds and the state and all that. So this is not completely unfunded. There are ways to get money to help fund this activity, whether it's the replacement or the inventory itself. So one of the funding mechanisms for this was the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that was passed in 2021. It contains about $15 billion to support these efforts, right? So it's not going to be completely unfunded out there. Next slide. So what does this funding look like, right? Well, most of this is going to be funneled through the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund program. So what this means is the feds are giving money to every state to help fund this. So this is not being controlled at the federal level. This is going to be controlled here at the local state level. And the expectation is that about, well, just under half of this is going to be set up to be funded through grants or forgiveness loans, right? So money you don't have to pay back from your organization, right? The rest of it is going to be funded through low interest loans. That's anywhere from 0 to just under prime, with terms about 30 to 40 years. So, you know, we're not looking at huge paybacks that have to be done immediately. So there are ways you can get money to do this. And this includes the inventory, right? So we're not just talking about replacing those lines, but doing this full on inventory, which is obviously going to take some time to get done right. Next slide. Okay. Now, of course, no one likes mandates. No one likes to be told what to do, even if it's necessarily for our own benefit. So the feds have put together, these are some other benefits you're going to get from doing this inventory to make you feel better about doing what they're telling you to, right? So some things that they've set up here. One is obviously you do this inventory, you're going to get an idea of the scope of work that's going to take to replace all of this stuff, right? So you can then take that information and put it into requests or applications for loans, for grants, and so forth and so on. So it helps you get access to this funding. It also is going to help you identify, by going through this inventory, maybe underserved or overserved areas, right? Do you have too much capacity over here, not enough over there, that kind of thing. Of course, the real biggest benefit of this is your public health, right? Being out and identifying where this stuff is and who is drinking water or using water that's coming through these lead and copper pipes, you know, it's going to allow you to identify and then mitigate those issues, right? So you can do things if you know a certain area is got lead pipes in it or lead solder, lead fittings, or those kind of things, you can contact those citizens. And this is where we get into community engagement. Say, hey, we are aware that you have lead pipes in your system. We're working hard to fix the problem, but in the interim, you know, give them Brita pitchers, right? Filtered water, which can help counteract that, or other filtration devices, which can also be covered by some of that funding as well. So you're not just having to go to, you know, Walmart and buy a bunch of these pitchers to hand out to your citizenry. You know, the Fed or through that drinking fund will help pay for some of that. Again, the ultimate goal here is to improve the public health. Those people we're serving, you know, for those in government, right? We're supposed to help protect and serve these folks, right? So this is part of that. And of course, once you know what you got, you can certainly manage it a lot better. So improved asset management. So you'll be able to better do preventive maintenance, capital improvement planning, and so forth and so on. So these are the benefits the feds have put out there for doing this program that they're making you do. Next slide, please. Now, why am I talking to a bunch of GIS people about this? Why am I bringing this up to y'all? Well, I think all of us know that GIS is a great way to visualize data. Looking at a series of spreadsheets showing the list of all the lead and copper pipes out there doesn't tell us a whole lot. it tells us we've got some. But by putting it in a map, now we can look at, are there key locations where this is at? Is it clustered in certain areas? Who is going to be impacted? You know, how many total linear feet do we have in any given, all these things that we know as GIS people are wonderful about. So we want to be able to be part of this from the get-go. That's why I said, remember, this is due in about 2 years. If you haven't gotten involved, now is the time to get involved, right? This is also a great opportunity for us to share what we can do. I get asked all the time, how do I sell GIS? How do I get buy-in? How do I show ROI? This is a great program to do that, right? It's going to be very public facing. It has a great impact. It really can make you the hero of the day, right? So you want to make sure you get involved in this. So next slide. What this is really going to do is allow those decision makers and the public and whatnot to see what's going on. We're going to be able to set up our standards on how we're collecting data, what we're showing and all that. Again, utilizing the GIS is kind of that key focal point, that hub, just like the last presenter was talking about with all of his dashboards and maps and things where they were doing the search and rescue activities and disaster response and all that. So next slide. Okay. Now, there is a public awareness or public access requirement as part of LCR. So what EPA has put out there is that any system serving over 50,000 people must make this data available to the public. Now, how you make the data available to the public, there's many ways you can do that. You can put up PDFs, you can put up JPEGs, you can, put, Excel sheets, whatever you want to up there to make it available. The key is you have to. Now, again, looking at what we just saw with the emergency response stuff, being able to put that data up in some more interactive format, like a web map. We love web maps. I mean, I do. I get very excited when I get to create and use a web map, right? So that's one way we can make this available. Show where these lead lines are, show where we've gone in and already replaced them, show those kind of things. And that's great. Maps are wonderful. We all love maps. Not everybody thinks in a map. Not everybody can read a map. My mother, I love her dearly, God rest her soul. She couldn't read a map to save her life. I had a map I printed out, showed her house, showed where her grocery store was that she went to every week. And I took her out there in the driveway and said, Mom, here you are. This is our house. Here's the grocery store. Show me on the map how you get to the grocery store. She looks at that map, looks at me, looks around, looks back at the map. She goes, I don't know. I just go. So looking at something other than a map might be another good way, and dashboards, like we were seeing earlier, are a great way to do this. It allows us to impart information, still graphically, still linked back to the maps, but we can see things like the total number of lead service lines that we need to replace, how many unknown lines are out there, which hopefully should start to go down as we go through this inventory. How many have we replaced? What's the total percentage? How many citizens are being impacted, and so forth and so on, right? So a dashboard is a great way to make this data available, because even though only those 50,000 and over are required to do this, EPA strongly encourages everybody to make this data available to the public. Be transparent. Let them know you're aware of the situation and what you're doing to mitigate it and fix it, right? Again, we don't want to be Flint, Michigan. No one wants to be there with a national headline showing up, citizens of Trippville not served by their elected officials, or city of Trippville doesn't care about its citizens. We don't want those headlines. And I say Trippville because if anybody's ever taken a training class from me, knows that's the data set that I use for my training there. So next slide. Now, so what do you got to collect? What's part of this inventory? Well, what EPA has done is they put out this template spreadsheet. So this template spreadsheet is going to have a lot of great information in there. So if we can go ahead and switch to it real quick, I'll kind of quickly walk us through this. Working that through. So this spreadsheet has a lot of tabs down at the bottom, a lot of sheets in the workbook there. One of the first ones is going to be just a overall guide of what this is for. How is it supposed to be used? And then from there, we go into, specifically how the template is supposed to be used is the next tab over there. And then, yep. And then the next part, if I remember correctly, since I can't see the tabs, is going to be the classification method, right? So this is the template instructions. So this is, as you're doing the inventory, how do you classify whether a line is lead or non-lead, right? So this is the decision tree that you're going to use to do that with, right? So the next part over is going to be some just general information about your system there. That's easy enough and all that. The next, I think, is the summary. Oh, no, inventory methods. So this is, how did you get your data, right? Did you look at as-built? Did you do field inventories? Did you talk to somebody and pull it out of their cranium, right? How did you do that inventory? So you're going to put the ways you did that. The next tab over, if I remember, and I'm trying to pull this, is an overall summary of the inventory. A lot of this is going to be auto-populated from the next tab, which is the actual detailed inventory. Okay, so this page is really one of the ones you want to focus on, because this is going to be what you need to capture, your basic schema for your database, right? So it's going to have things like whatever your unique identifier is for those lines, your inventory ID, whatever that, where is it located? What's the street address and intersection or things like that? Is it serving a sensitive population, disadvantaged neighborhood, and so on? So this thing keeps going on. There's a bunch of columns in there. One thing I'd like to point out is that when you get this and you start clicking on any of these cells, there's going to be drop downs. So the EPA has already kind of set up defined domains, and you will want to match to those to make your life easier when you're trying to send this data back. Because remember, this has to be submitted to the state, right? So pay attention to that. From there, then the next one over is going to be, how did you make your data available to the public, right? Again, if you're under 50,000, you don't have to, but if you're over, you have to. They want everybody to, if possible. So you just fill in how you did it. What did you link to? How did people find stuff? Those kind of things. And then the next one, I think, is the checklist. Yep. So before you go to submit your data to the state, they have this nice checklist for you to go through to determine, did you get everything you're supposed to have, right? So this is a great resource for you as you're preparing to do this inventory. Okay, we can go back to the PowerPoint. And while they're doing that, I'll grab some coffee. Okay, and the next slide. Okay, so where do you get all this data? Where's it all going to come from? That's always the big question. Well, there's not going to be one general, just go pick it from here and you're done, right? It's not going to be that easy. You're probably going to start with overall staff knowledge. I know every water system I've ever worked with, you have that one guy, I'm going to call him Billy Bob, who's been there for 50 years, who knows where every valve, every hydrant, every fitting, every meter, whatever it is in that system. He knows it all. And that's going to be one of your key resources, right? Because he's going to be able to sit there and tell you, well, yeah, this was installed back when I was knee high to a grasshopper, and yeah, we put lead in there, and nah, we put that in. That was just done 2 years ago. That was all PVC, right? So that's going to be a good one. To back up what he says, right? Hopefully you have some paper records, right? So you got some as-built, some design plans, some valve cards, those kind of things that you can pull on and look at that. Now, if you get real lucky, you might actually have some digital data. There might be a spreadsheet that was used to track all the maintenance. How many places have you seen that where everything's done in spreadsheets, or an access database, right? So you might be able to find some records there that you can pull in and use that are digital, which makes life a lot easier. Now, if you're really lucky, you have a full-blown GIS where you've already done a very thorough inventory, and you've already got 90% of this stuff, and then you just have to chase down that last 10%. Or you've got a full-blown asset management system, CityWorks or Cartograph or Elements XS or any other number of those things that are out there nowadays that can really help you get at the beginning core of this data. Next slide. The problem often, though, is you're going to have a lot of data. Right? So what do you do with that lot of data to get it to some manageable size, right? You got to trim it down. Well, one of the ways you can trim that down is, in theory, no new lead pipes were put in the ground since 1986. So anything that was done in 87, 88 and newer should not be lead. Now, I say should not because I'm sure that in 1986, because this was coming down the pike, there was a whole bunch of lead pipe that was available very cheap. And so somebody said, let me go buy that. And they bought a whole bunch of lead pipe, stuck it in the warehouse. And you think it just sat there? It probably got put in the ground, right? So I would probably buffer that 88, 89, maybe even as far as 90. But again, it's a way of trimming down the data, right? Anything after, say, 1990, you're fairly certain, 90% certain that it's not going to be lead, right? You're going to be good with that. So that's one way you can do that. You can also go through your CAMA data. For those that don't know CAMA, that's computer-aided mass appraisal. That's your tax assessors. And start looking at, well, when were the houses built, right? When did they go on? Again, using that date idea as well. Of course, your permits could be another way to do that. Next slide. Okay. So once you've kind of trimmed those things down and you've got things manageable, you know your priority areas that you need to go do, how do you take that to the next level, right? So this is where you're going to start doing field work, okay? Remember, these are underground utilities. They're not something you can just like power lines overhead and go, oh yeah, that's a 3-phase and that's a 2-phase and all that kind of good stuff. This is stuff underground. So how do you do it? Well, one of the easiest ways, and we've used this at SAM, is you go to the meters, pop the meter box open. You can see what's coming in from the distribution side. You can see what's going out to the house or the building or whatnot. And that's going to give you some idea. You can see what the pipe material is there. And that's a very quick and relatively easy way to do that. But what happens if you're fairly certain, because Billy Bob told you that, nope, I know there's lead lines in this part of the system and you don't see it. How do you go out after that? Well, depending on the size of the line, you might be able to TV it, right? Just like we do sewer and stuff, get a camera in there, take a look. If you can't do that, then you might want to do what we call potholing. Dig it. Take a set of post hole diggers and shovel and dig down, or if it's not too big of trouble, get a backhoe out there. Do it, just don't cut the line. That would be bad too, right? So physically put your eyes on that line as well. Now, another thing that can help you trim this stuff down a little bit and deal with this is most lead pipes weren't greater than about 2 inches in diameter. So anything bigger than that would most likely not be lead. Again, I'm using most likely because there's always exceptions to every rule and whatnot. But this will also help you find neat things like wood. Anybody encountered wood pipes? In Atlanta, where I'm from, well, I don't live downtown. Nobody in their right mind lives in downtown Atlanta. But we actually have wood service pipes in the water system. You'll find them in Boston, New York, Philly. You've heard the term fire plug? That came from wooden pipes. You would dig down to the wooden pipe, drill a hole in it, fill the hole with water, use the bucket brigade, and then you come back and you would plug that hole because of where it had the fire. That's the term fire plug, right? Okay. Little story. I'm a history guy. Sorry. Like to do that. There. So next slide, please. Okay. Here's some links to resources. You've already seen the template spreadsheet. EPA has a great webinar that is available, a little over an hour long, that talks about a lot of this in more detail, as well as talks about funding mechanisms and what's available from that. And then the EPA website has some good information. This is an evolving thing, although it's due in 2 years. The feds like to do what the feds do. They keep changing the requirements. So that's a great website to go find that. So with that, next slide. I think we have a couple of minutes. Any questions? Comments? Want to say nice things about me? Okay, well, thank you so much, folks. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you learned some things. Feel free if you have some questions later on that come to you, reach out to me. I'm happy to help and continue to enjoy the rest of your conference. I'm going to probably sneak out and go visit a certain battleship that's not too far from here, but don't tell my boss. So.